Welcome to Castified. It feels like everywhere you turn in American politics lately, there's this talk, right? This frustration with the two-party system. Do you ever find yourself just wishing there was, I don't know, another option, a different voice that maybe truly represents your views? Well, if you do, you're definitely not alone. And today, we're diving deep into something that's really shaken things up recently. It's Elon Musk's big announcement, very public, about forming a brand new political party. He's calling it the America Party. We're going to try and unpack what's really behind this political bombshell. We'll look at the history, the huge challenges third parties always face in the U.S., and crucially, what might make this attempt by Musk different, or maybe just really audacious. We've got news reports, political analysis, public polls, a whole stack of stuff. Our mission really is to help you cut through the noise and figure out, is America actually ready for a third way? So let's set the scene. It's Saturday, July 5th, 2025. Elon Musk goes on X, his platform, and just declares it. The America Party is formed. And he was pretty blunt about why. He said he wants to give back freedom, challenge what he calls the nation's one-party system.
Yeah, that quote was something else. When it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy. Today, the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom.
Wow. Pretty strong words.
Very strong. And look, you really can't disconnect this from the growing feud between Musk and President Trump. The trigger, the thing that really seemed to set it off, was Trump signing that huge controversial budget bill, the one big, beautiful bill.
Right. That makes sense as a catalyst.
Absolutely. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago Musk was, well, basically Trump's main campaign financier in 2024.
Yeah, I remember that. And he even had a job in the administration, right?
Exactly. Head of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, they called it. Supposedly there to slash government spending. He was an insider.
So, to go from funding the campaign and running a department to this, it's a huge falling out. And it's all centered on this big, beautiful bill, which Musk claims will bankrupt the U.S. Experts are saying, what, an extra $3.4 trillion added to the deficit?
Over a decade, yeah. That's a massive number.
And Trump didn't take it lying down, did he?
Not at all. Threats started flying immediately, cutting billions in subsidies to Musk's companies.
Even suggesting deportation, even though he's a citizen.
Yeah, suggesting deportation from Musk, who's been a U.S. citizen since 2002. And then you had Trump allies like Steve Bannon jumping in, calling Musk a foreigner. It got ugly fast.
Okay, so the feud is intense. But what about the public? Is there really an appetite for this? Musk did one of his famous polls, right? On Independence Day, he asked on X if people want independence from the two-party, some would say uniparty system. And the results, pretty striking. Over 1.2 million people responded.
A huge response.
And it was 2-1 in favor of a new party. So Musk declares, by a factor of 2-1, you want a new political party and you shall have it.
Classic Musk. But, beyond his own followers, broader polling actually backs this up to some extent. There was a Qantas Insights survey, about 1,000 voters, and it found 40% of Americans would consider backing this America Party.
40%. That's significant for something that doesn't even really exist yet.
It is. Broken down, it was 13% very likely and 26% somewhat likely.
Yeah.
And the demographics are interesting, too. Republican men showed the most interest, 57%.
Yeah.
Independent men were next at 47%.
And Democrats
largely disliked it. Only 7% of Democratic men were keen. But, experts looking at this say, hold on, it's not necessarily about Musk himself. It seems to be more about this deep, widespread frustration with the whole system. That same poll found 59% of independents feel neither party represents American values well.
Which kind of tracks with what we've seen historically, right? This desire for a third option isn't exactly new.
Not at all.
I think I saw a stat back in 2012, maybe half of Americans thought the two-party system wasn't working.
That sounds about right.
And by 2022, that jumped to 63%. Almost 2/3 of people feeling like both Democrats and Republicans are failing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Musk's poll, while splashy, really just tapped into this growing undercurrent of dissatisfaction.
Okay, so the desire is there, clearly. But you mentioned challenges earlier. Why is it so incredibly hard for third parties to actually succeed in the U.S.? You called it a tall order.
Oh, it's more than a tall order.
Yeah.
It's like climbing Everest in flip-flops sometimes. This system has huge barriers, almost designed to keep it a two-party game. First off, just getting on the ballot.
Yeah.
Ballot access. It sounds simple, but it's a legal nightmare.
How so?
Every state has different rules, different signature requirements, different deadlines. And they're often incredibly demanding. Like California needs about 219,000 signatures. You only get 105 days to collect them.
Wow.
Texas is 113,000 in just 70 days. Florida, 145,000. Yeah. Think about the organization, the money, the sheer number of volunteers you need.
Which the main parties already have built in.
Exactly. They have networks of maybe 1 or 2 million volunteers, third parties. They're scraping together resources just to get started. It costs a fortune in time and money. Which brings us to the second barrier, money. Capital M.
Right. Politics runs on money.
And the difference is just staggering. Look at the period from Jan 2023 to June 2024. Democrats raised $772 million. Republicans, $663 million.
Okay, huge numbers. And third parties.
All the other parties combined, just $4 million.
Like $4 million compared to over $1 billion combined for the big two?
Less than 0.3% of the total funding. It's almost nothing. And that money buys everything. Ads everywhere. Online, TV, billboards, you name it. Constant visibility. Plus, remember where a lot of that major party money comes from? Corporate donors. And it's not charity, it's strategic. Pharma companies donating to, say, block cheaper generic drugs. Tech giants funding efforts to stop data privacy loss.
So the money reinforces the status quo.
Precisely. Barrier 3. Media access and, crucially, the debates.
The presidential debates. Always a point of contention.
It's ruthless. To get on that stage, you need 2 things. 1, you have to be on enough state ballots that you could theoretically win the 270 electoral votes needed.
Okay, that connects back to barrier 1.
Yep. And 2, you need at least 15% support in 4 different major national polls. CNN, NBC, Fox, places like that.
15% is a high bar before anyone's really heard of you.
Extremely high. Think about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in 2024. He polled close to 13%, but still didn't make it. Jill Stein ran 3 times, never debated.
So it's a cycle. No media exposure.
Means no money, which means no effective campaign, which means no public support, which means no media exposure. It's vicious.
Okay. Ballot access, money, media. What else?
The big one, maybe the structural linchpin,
Okay.
winner-take-all electoral system.
Explain that. How does that work against third parties?
Okay, so unlike some other systems, say in India where seats can be won with smaller percentages, in the U.S. presidential election, if you win a state, even by a single vote, you typically get all of that state's electoral votes.
All of them. So like win Texas by 0.1%, you get all 38 electoral votes.
Exactly. Think about Ross Perot back in 1992.
Right, the independent candidate. He got a lot of votes, didn't he?
A ton. Nearly 20 million votes. That was 19% of the total national popular vote. 19%.
So how many states did he win? How many electoral votes?
0. None. 19 million votes essentially vanished in terms of electoral power because he couldn't get over the 50% mark in any single state.
Wow. So that really discourages people from voting third party, right? You feel like you're wasting your vote.
Precisely. It forces strategic voting. People think, well, I prefer candidate C, but they can't win, so I better vote for A just to stop B, or vice versa. It locks in the 2 major parties.
Okay. Those barriers are incredibly high. Almost feels like the system is designed to prevent change. So why? Why do Americans still seem to secretly, or maybe not so secretly, want a third option? What's the root cause of this frustration?
Yeah, it goes deeper than just wanting more choice. There are some big structural reasons. First, extreme political polarization.
We hear that term a lot. What does it mean in practical terms?
Well, over decades, the Democratic Party has moved significantly further left, and the Republican Party has moved sharply right. You know, simplifying it a bit, left often means more government programs, social safety nets, taxing the wealthy, maybe more lenient migration policies.
Okay.
And right tends to mean emphasizing individual responsibility, less government intervention, tax cuts, especially for business, strong border control.
Right. But most people aren't just one thing, are they?
Exactly. That's the key. Most ordinary people are somewhere in the middle, picking and choosing. You might want lower business taxes, but also government action on climate change. You might support LGBTQ plus rights, but also want stricter immigration rules.
It's a spectrum, not a box.
Precisely. But as the parties move to the extremes, Democrats pushing for things like free college, universal health care, Republicans doubling down on nationalism, corporate tax cuts, Trump's really aggressive immigration stance.
The middle ground shrinks.
Right. And voters who want, a bit of both, they start to feel politically homeless. Neither party really speaks for them.
That makes sense. What else is driving it?
Second, there's this feeling of a political vacuum, a lacuna, and it leads to fear-based voting.
Fear-based? How so?
Remember 2016? Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had historically low approval ratings. People weren't exactly thrilled with either choice.
Definitely not.
And polls after the election showed something really telling. Over half, 53%, of Trump voters said their main motivation was stopping Hillary. And almost half, 46%, of Clinton voters said their main motivation was stopping Trump.
So people weren't voting for someone as much as against the other person?
For millions, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest motivator was fear, not hope. That signals a system that isn't offering inspiring choices.
Okay, polarization, fear-based voting.
Yeah.
What's the third reason?
This is a big one, and it fuels that uniparty idea Musk mentioned. It's the perception, and often the reality, that major parties end up aligning with lobbyists and donors, not voters, especially when big money is involved.
So they fight on TV, but behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, on issues where powerful interests have a stake, they often quietly agree, or at least agree not to rock the boat too much. Look at healthcare.
Always a hot topic.
Americans pay, what, 2.5 times more for medicines than people in other wealthy countries? It's crazy. Polls show overwhelming support for measures to lower drug prices.
So why doesn't it happen?
Well, follow the money. Massive donations flood in from pharmaceutical companies who want to block reforms that would allow, say, Medicare to negotiate prices or make it easier for generics to come to market.
Can you give an example? Like, how big is the price difference?
It can be shocking. Think about a basic painkiller like paracetamol or acetaminophen. In a place like India, you might get 20 tablets for maybe 21 cents. In the U.S., the equivalent could easily be $5 or more.
20 times the cost.
Easily. So you have to ask, who are politicians really listening to? Or take military spending. In 2023, both parties came together to approve a record $877 billion defense budget. That's higher than spending during the Cold War.
While people are saying they want investment elsewhere.
Right. Polls show Americans generally want less spent on wars, more on roads, schools, hospitals. The war on terror since 2001, it's cost something like $8 trillion.
$8 trillion.
Yeah, including future veterans care. And claimed maybe up to 929,000 lives globally. Yet the spending keeps going up, supported by both sides.
So the idea is that this duopoly means there's no real pressure on either party to truly challenge these powerful interests because they both benefit from them.
That's the core argument. When the only two players often align with the same moneyed interests on key issues, ordinary people feel like they don't have a voice. Hence the search for a third way.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the frustration, which brings us back to the big question. Can Elon Musk actually do it? Can he build this third party? I mean, the graveyard of failed attempts is huge.
It is. And historically, you'd say the odds are incredibly long, almost impossible. But Elon Musk isn't a typical politician or activist. He's Elon Musk, a genius billionaire, a strategic player, and he has tools nobody else has really had before in this context.
Like what? How does he overcome those barriers we talked about? The media wall, for instance.
Right, the media wall. Most third parties struggle desperately for any attention. Musk, he doesn't get begged for a microphone. He owns the microphone, or at least a massive chunk of the digital public square.
You mean X?
Exactly. His tweets move global markets. His rants become instant headlines. He has, 335 million active users on X and 221 million followers himself.
So he can bypass traditional media?
Largely, yes. If the TV networks won't host his debates, he can host his own on X, potentially reaching millions directly, unfiltered. He is the media, in a way.
Okay, that's a big difference. What about the money wall?
Again, potentially neutralized. Third parties bleed cash and constantly struggle to fundraise. Musk has a personal fortune estimated around $351 billion.
So he can just bankroll it himself?
Pretty much. He could fund a serious national campaign with basically no donors, no lobbyists, and therefore, theoretically, no strings attached.
Yeah.
His money buys him freedom from the traditional influence game.
And ballot access, that logistical nightmare.
Look, Musk builds rockets. He builds global satellite networks. He tackles incredibly complex engineering and logistical challenges, compared to getting SpaceX to Mars, navigating the 50 different sets of state ballot access laws.
Seems manageable.
For him, with his resources and his startup founder mentality, you have to assume he sees it as a complex project to be solved, not an insurmountable barrier. If he can find people to launch rockets, he can find people to launch a political party. He builds differently.
That's a fascinating perspective. He attacks the problem differently. But even with all that, his personality is, well, it's polarizing. Couldn't that be its own barrier?
Absolutely. That's the wild card. He alienates a lot of people, but his strategy seems somewhat tailored to that.
How so? What's the strategy?
He's not aiming, initially at least, to win the presidency himself. He can't, anyway, not being natural born.
Right.
Instead, he's talked about a laser focus on just a handful of key races, maybe 2 or 3 Senate seats, 8 or 10 House districts.
Right, just those.
The goal isn't total takeover. It's to become the deciding vote, to gain enough seats, even a small number, to hold the balance of power in a closely divided Congress. That gives you immense leverage on key legislation, far beyond your numbers.
A kingmaker strategy.
Kind of, yeah. It's targeted, maybe more achievable than a full-blown national presidential campaign right out of the gate.
And what would the impact of that be? Who would this party attract?
Well, based on his current trajectory in the polling, it seems likely the America Party would poll significantly more voters from the Republican side than the Democratic side.
So splitting the Republican vote.
Potentially, yeah. A bit like Perot did in '92, which arguably helped Bill Clinton win. It could draw away traditional Republicans, maybe those Nikki Haley-type voters, or even some disaffected Médier supporters who feel Trump isn't delivering or has gone too far.
It could really scramble the existing political math.
It absolutely could. Though, it's worth remembering, Musk's own political journey is complex.
He hasn't always been aligned with the right, has he?
Not at all. He supported Obama in '08 and '12, Hillary Clinton in 2016, Joe Biden in 2020.
Wow.
But, as some sources note, something shifted, particularly around COVID. His rhetoric moved much more sharply into right-wing territory. Some even used phrases like, his brain has melted. It's been quite a transformation.
So wrapping this up, we have this clear, undeniable public hunger for something different, for a third option. But it's pushing against these massive entrenched barriers, structural, financial, media barriers designed to keep the two-party system in place.
It's a classic unstoppable force meeting an movable object scenario almost.
But this time, the force has Elon Musk's resources behind it.
Exactly. His wealth, his personal media platform, his unconventional approach. It makes this attempt different, unique even.
Yeah.
For the first time in maybe decades, you could argue a third party might not just, sputter out. It could launch with rocket fuel.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you listening today. Considering all these challenges we've talked about, the history of the system itself, what single aspect of American politics do you think would need to change the most for any third party, even one with Musk's backing, to truly reshape the landscape? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us in this deep dive.